Honestly, I feel like the way that we play, the energy that we come with every game, it's not going to be an easy night for anyone who comes in here or who plays against us. And I think that's part of our identity, is to make it tough on teams. And it just goes to show that no matter who's going to play or who's going to be out there, we're gonna give you 100%. So any team that we play against, we feel like we have a chance.
Hey, what's up? This is Blake Wesley, and you're listening to The Briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 177 of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. I am Casey Holdahl, and your Portland Trail Blazers bouncing back from a disappointing loss versus the Los Angeles Lakers to get a fantastic win versus the Oklahoma City Thunder Wednesday night at Moda Center, giving the NBA defending champs their first loss of the season. We'll talk about those games. We'll preview the upcoming road trip. Trailblazers heading out for their first extra extended road trip of the season, a 5-game road trip, heading to the East Coast and then working their way back west throughout the next 10 days. We'll also discuss some of the injuries the Trailblazers have been enduring through the first couple weeks of the season and where they stand in terms of those rehabilitations. And we'll hear from Remix head coach Jonah Hersku, the Remix starting their G League season on Friday. We'll hear from head coach Jonah Hersku about his thoughts going into his first season head coaching the Remix on this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, on Friday, the Trailblazers defeat the Denver Nuggets at the Moda Center in an incredibly exciting game, a game where the Blazers come back, end up winning with their defense in the fourth quarter. A fantastic game, just a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, enthusiasm. Trailblazers, have beaten the Warriors at that point. They get a win versus the Nuggets. Everyone's feeling really good about the team. You got the weekend off. You can address some things. You can get some rest in. But you're coming into Monday's game versus the Lakers, playing on the second night of a back-to-back. The Lakers are, and they don't have a bunch of their guys. So you're feeling really good about going into that game on Monday. And then the Blazers just don't bring, I don't even know what it was. I don't know if it was effort, intensity, whatever it was. Nothing worked for the Trailblazers versus the Lakers on Monday night. They end up losing that game 123-115. No Luka, no LeBron, no Austin Reeves. Second night of a back-to-back for the Lakers. And the Blazers just come out and they have a good first quarter, but then I don't know if they left their foot off the gas. I don't know if, as we've seen over and over again throughout the years in the NBA, everyone can play. And so when guys get an opportunity who don't typically get an opportunity to play, a lot of times they really do something with it. That's what we saw versus the Lakers. You still would have really liked to see the Blazers get that game. So the Blazers end up losing that game, as I mentioned, 123-115. Blazers shoot nearly 50% from the field in that game, but just go 9 of 40 from 3 in that game, really kind of sinking their chances in that one. The Lakers seem like they're just getting into the paint, scoring at will. Nick Smith Jr. puts up 25 points in 27 minutes. DeAndre Ayton, after, Donovan Clingan got the much better of the matchup versus the Lakers in the win in Los Angeles, DeAndre Ayton gave it back to Donovan in the game versus the Lakers in Portland a week later, gets that double-double, really looks good in that performance. Got booed at the beginning too, which I don't really understand, folks. DeAndre doesn't deserve to be booed. Played hard when he was on the team. An amicable separation, I don't know why you'd necessarily boo DeAndre Ayton, but you did, and he played really well. I think those two things are probably a little bit related, so maybe something to consider there, folks, how we manage our emotions and how that affects the team going forward. But either way, kind of performance that really makes you wonder, who is this team? Are the Blazers the team that we've seen for the first 6 games that look really good, and even if they're not getting wins in the games versus the Clippers and the Timberwolves, they still looked really good in those games, looked like they could have won those games. A few things had gone their way. Or was that just kind of a temporary moment in time, and now that they're maybe scouted a little bit more, and now that things have kind of calmed down a little bit, things aren't so emotionally charged as they were a week, 2 weeks before? Is there a let up? Is this the team that they are versus the Lakers? And so you have that game, and then you go into a game on Wednesday versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, the defending champs, team that hasn't lost a game, also playing on the second night of the back-to-back, also resting a fair amount of their players. Chet Holmgren didn't play. Jalen Williams is not yet back in the lineup. Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, none of those guys end up playing in that game. And so kind of a similar situation as versus the Lakers, though obviously still with a lot more talent, SGA, the whole host of great players they have there in Oklahoma City. So that game is scheduled for Wednesday, and after the game on Monday, you're like, boy, Geez, what's going to happen in this one? This should be a good kind of indication of who this team is. What are they right now? Are they the team we saw for the first 6 games, or are they the team that lost to the Lakers the other night? Somewhere in between. And then they come out and have a really tough first quarter versus the Thunder, go down by as many as 22 points. I think at the end of the first quarter, it was, I think, 41-21 or 42-22, something like that. Definitely didn't look like uh, it looked like the team in the first quarter of the game versus the Thunder. It looked like the team that we saw in the last 3 quarters of the game versus the Lakers. And again, at that point in time, you're like, boy, we were probably in for a really long night, and heck, maybe for a really long season. I think again, when those two things kind of compound right after each other, I think there's an inclination that's like, boy, what's going on here? Which team is this? Fortunately, we did find out what kind of team the Trailblazers were throughout the duration of that game. They're a team that does not quit. They stay resilient. They keep shooting. They keep their heads up. They stay positive, and it ends up coming back to them in the end. Trailblazers end up winning that game 121-119 in front of a crowd of 16,822 at Moda Center on Wednesday night. Best win of Portland's season so far, I would say, in a season where they've already had some really good wins, have already, I think, really overperformed expectations, at least for the first couple weeks of the season. And that's even with some injuries, not even some injuries, like some pretty significant injuries, particularly in regards to the way the Trailblazers are trying to play this season, and still having success, staying afloat, staying in games, riding kind of the wave of being down and knowing that the way that they play sometimes is going to result in probably some valleys, and then just waiting for those peaks to come back around. And that's exactly what we saw Wednesday night versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Between Deni, Avdija, Jrue Holiday, and Jerami Grant combining to go 1 of 13 in the first quarter. The performance versus the Lakers, as I mentioned 2 nights before that, and having not beaten the Thunder in their previous 4 seasons, their previous 16 tries, you can imagine that a lot of people after that first quarter were probably thinking to themselves, what's going to happen in this game? Again, is this the team that we saw versus the Lakers, or is the team we saw versus the Jazz and the Warriors and the Clippers and the Timberwolves, even though those games didn't result in wins? But as I mentioned, the players, the coaches, Portland's bench keep positive, keep believing, they keep shooting, and it comes back around to them. I thought that was really interesting, something Jrue Holiday had said, that, this team stays really positive with their guys on the team, guys like Duop, guys like Tumani, up and down the roster, Dame, who stay really positive and keep telling guys to keep playing the way that they're playing, and it's going to come back around, and that having a positive effect on the team. And I think it's really important to know just the importance of keeping that positive outlook, even when things aren't going especially well. And it's been working for the Trailblazers. They end up only making 2 2-pointers in the second quarter, but Jrue Holiday, Jerami Grant, and Duop Reath combined to go 8 of 9 from 3 in the second quarter, and that allows them to outscore the Thunder by 12 to cut the halftime deficit to 7. And then the Thunder pushed the lead back up to 14 with a little more than 4 minutes to play in the third quarter. And once again, playing the champs, playing a team you've lost to 16 straight times, a team that hasn't lost in their first 8 games. You look at the way that the Thunder are able to push the score back up. And a lot of times you can take that first punch and come back. If the team manages to push back again and goes up a significant margin that second time, a lot of times that's the one where it's like, okay, we really can't. We don't just have the energy. We don't have the ability. We don't have the time to come back again versus a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder. But that, again, was not the case. Trailblazers, once again, stick to the plan, stay tough. They end up finishing out the third quarter on an 11-2 run, one that includes Deni Avdija making his first shot after starting the game, missing his first 11 shots, which cuts Oklahoma City's lead to 86-81 going into the fourth quarter. The momentum the Blazers got at the end of that third quarter carries over into the fourth quarter. They get their first lead at 97-96 on a Jrue Holiday jumper with 6 minutes and 44 seconds left to play. Then they would follow that up, or Jrue would, with a three-pointer to expand that advantage. From there, the game would go back and forth. Teams would trade having the lead, trade tying the game. Blazers go on a 9-0 run to go up 112-104 with 2 minutes, 48 seconds to play. Thunder then get that lead back down to just 1 with 7 seconds to play. Blazers make their free throws, but then Blazers up 3, Thunder are inbounding. They get into Isaiah Joe. Blazers not able to foul, which you also it's kind of hard to keep fouling over and over again when you're up three. Not because that's not what you should do, but because eventually the other team is going to get off a 3-pointer, and you have to be really careful that you don't foul in that situation because you definitely don't want to give up 3 points at the free throw line, and you certainly don't want to give up a 4-point play in that situation. So you really got to be careful about when you choose to foul and how you foul. And so the Blazers are able to do it a couple times, not able to do it every time. Isaiah Joe gets up a 3-pointer, doesn't go down. Casey Wallace gets the free throw, gets it back out to Isaiah Joe. He takes what looks like another 3-pointer, but has a foot on the line, gets fouled by Toumani Camara, so he ends up getting to shoot 2 free throws. He makes the first free throw, misses the second on purpose. Blazers get the rebound. Game over. Portland wins. 121, 119. Crowd goes bananas. Again, one of the best games I can remember in Portland in some time. Just when you take into account the quality of the opponent, kind of the way that they started the game, the way that they entered the game after the loss to the Lakers, the contributions that they got up and down the roster, particularly from a guy like Duop Reath, who I think, he's played significant minutes in 2 games this season, and both those games they don't win without Duop, which I think really goes to show just how great of a mentality guys on this team have, and particularly a guy like Wop, just stand ready, knowing his role, not getting frustrated when he's not necessarily able to play, just comes in and does exactly what they need from him when he does get the opportunity to play. That's all you can ask for from your bench guys, and the Blazers are getting that from their guys on the bench, and that is really something to, I think, pay attention to this season and to really feel proud about if you're the Blazers and the coaching staff and those players, because that is not necessarily something that a lot of guys are able to do. Deni Avdija finishes with 26 points, 15 of those coming from the free throw line. I think Deni's ability to get to the line this year has been so important. As I've talked about multiple times, as Tiago has talked about, there's a high variance when you play this brand of basketball. And sometimes when your shots aren't falling and you're not able to stop their shots from falling, it really starts to feel like, where are these points going to come from? The free throw line is one of those places where you can get those points, and Deni Avdija has been delivering from the free throw line so far this season. So 15 of those points for Deni coming from the free throw line to go with 10 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals, and a block in 36 minutes. Deni coming 1 assist away from a triple-double in a game where, again, he missed his first 11 shots, still ends up with 26 points. I think that just, again, goes to show able to score in a lot of different ways and able to stick with it too. I think sometimes when things aren't going well offensively, I think on the outside, the inclination is like, hey guys, just stop shooting. Someone's got to score points. Someone's got to take those shots, and you want your best players taking those shots, and you just hope that eventually those percentages are going to come back around to you. And that's what happened in the game Wednesday night versus the Thunder. Jrue Holiday finishes with 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in 34 minutes. Jerami Grant, another 20-point game off the bench to go with 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and a block in 33 minutes. Shaedon Sharpe, 18 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, an assist, and a block in 22 minutes. Shaedon playing some very efficient basketball right now. I think that little knock that has had him on the injury report for the past couple games of the season, hopefully getting a little bit better. I'm guessing they're probably trying to limit Shaedon's minutes just a little bit to kind of not put too much load on whatever he's dealing with there. But he's playing some really good basketball right now after having a little bit of a tough start to the season. Toumani Camara goes 6 of 9 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3 for 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal before fouling out in 37 minutes. And as I mentioned, you have to talk about Duop Reath in this game. 12 points on 4 or 5 shooting from 3 from Duop. And it was really, in the second quarter, nothing's really working for the Trailblazers. They're already down, I think, 22, 23 points in the second quarter. Wop comes in, goes 3 of 3 from 3, hits another 3 later on in the game as well, does the Jordan shrug because basically he had to throw it up over Isaiah Hartenstein as the shot clock was winding down. Got that one to go. And it wasn't just that he had 9 points in the second quarter and 12 points for the game. It was that those points came when the Blazers were just struggling so hard to score. And so to have a guy like Wop come in and be like, hey, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do. If it works out, great. If not, I'm going to live with that. I think, again, it just really goes to show how important every single guy is on this roster and the role that every single player can play if they remain consistent and stay ready and do the things that the coaching staff is asking them to do. So Wop ends up having a fantastic performance in that game, really helps Trailblazers win that one. One of the best wins at Moda Center, as I mentioned, over the last couple seasons. given the defending champs their first loss. And granted, yes, they're playing on the second night of a back-to-back. They decided to rest a bunch of their players, but they decided to rest a bunch of their players, presumably because they thought they could beat the Trailblazers with the guys they had available on Wednesday night. So I think Portland going in, winning that game, I think that's a little more gratifying too, because it's like, at a certain point, I think they recognize that other teams, particularly after they lost to the Lakers the way that they did, probably feel like, yeah, this Blazer team, yeah, they're young and they're plucky, but we're going to be able to beat these guys with half of our roster because we're just that much better than they are. And I think for the Oklahoma City Thunder, a lot of times that's probably the case, but it was not the case on Wednesday night. And so I think those are the wins for a team that are especially gratifying when, one, you're able to battle through adversity to get a win, which the Trailblazers absolutely had to do in that first quarter and throughout the entire game, really. Again, they were down 14 points in the second half, so it wasn't even like it was just in the first quarter. They had to fight hard in order to remain in that game, but also to win a game versus the champs that you hadn't beaten 16 straight times. They're thinking like, hey, we haven't lost these guys since 2001. We're going to be able to go out there and beat these guys, even on the second out of it back, even if we're going to rest a bunch of guys because we feel like we're that good. Trailblazers showed that they have some quality on their team as well. So a really gratifying win for the Trailblazers. Congrats to those guys. Congrats to Tiago and the coaching staff for sticking with it in that one. And now they head out on a 5-game road trip. And speaking of that road trip, the Trailblazers heading out on Thursday morning to Miami to begin their first extended Eastern Conference road trip, or at least play some games in the Eastern Conference. Heading out first, Miami on Saturday, Monday versus the Magic, Wednesday at the Pelicans, Friday at the Rockets, and Sunday at the Mavericks. All those games, I think you feel really good about Portland's chances of winning if they're able to play the same way that they've been playing over the first couple weeks of the season. You got a Miami Heat team that's been playing really well this year as well. The only team that I think is playing faster than the Trailblazers right now is the Miami Heat. Only team that's playing more possessions. Only team that's probably getting up shots as fast as the Trailblazers are. And, a team that throughout the years has always been very consistent under Eric Spoelstra, who's house caught on fire and burned down on Wednesday morning, which condolences to Coach Spoelstra and his family. That's an awful thing to have happen to you. So Trailblazers heading out for that trip. Then they faced a Magic team, as I mentioned, on Monday, a team that I think has struggled a little bit more than people thought they were going to, but definitely has a lot of talent. I think still one of the odds-on favorites to win the Eastern Conference, a team that the Blazers have generally had some success against in Orlando. I don't know that they've played a team that's had this much talent in Orlando since I don't know when. It's been probably some time, but Orlando, for whatever reason, a place Trailblazers generally have played pretty well throughout the season. Pelicans getting one of their first wins of the season by beating the Mavericks. Been a rough start to the season for the Pelicans. Injuries, things just not necessarily locking in the way that I think they hoped they would under Willie Green, but it seems like maybe making a little bit of progress on that, able to get some wins there, but definitely a game that should be winnable for the Trailblazers on Wednesday. Then Friday, you get to the Rockets, probably the biggest test of the trip, a very good athletic young Rockets team. And then you finish off by facing the Mavericks, a team that has been struggling this season as well. Again, young team dealing with injuries, kind of trying to find their way, trying to play a different style of basketball. Cooper Flag, kind of doing some guard stuff, not necessarily as a forward, which I think he's probably more accustomed to at this point in time. So should be a pretty interesting trip for the Trailblazers. As I mentioned, they're 5-3 right now after the first 8 games, which, I mean, I know for me that would definitely be towards the top end of what my expectation for what their record would be after the first couple weeks of the season. And I think that maybe even changes your perspective a little bit going into this road trip. Think about this trip too. It's a long trip, but there's games off between every single game. So, you figure, a chance to enter every one of those games really rested, and a chance to, particularly when you're playing teams for the first time in a season, kind of some of that preparation, some of the shoot around stuff, some of the getting up to speed on what the other team likes to do, having, days off in between, I think is probably helpful for that. If you're playing any of those games on the second night of a back-to-back, you're still having your study, and you're still having your team meeting where you're talking about tendencies and what you want to do and what they're going to try to do. But having days off in between that is super helpful. So I think that road trip schedule's out really well for Portland. Now it's able to see if they're able to take, whatever momentum they got from that win versus Oklahoma City and just kind of the way that they've been playing so far this season outside of that Laker game, I would say, and see if they can apply that on the road versus, some good competition. So, if the Blazers are able to go out and even go 500 on this road trip, they went 2-3 on their first road trip with wins versus the Lakers and the Jazz, one loss to the Clippers in that one. If they head out on a 5-game trip and they're able to even go like 3-2, and I shouldn't even say even, going 3-2 on a 5-game road trip, it doesn't even matter who you're playing. That's a good road trip. So if they're able to go out and play 500 basketball or a little better than 500 basketball on this trip coming back to Portland, then I think you really start to feel really good about kind of where this team is at. And that's even with, having to endure some injuries right now that, again, have come at just kind of the exact worst places that the Blazers are probably able to deal with them. So the fact they've been able to endure, all the things they've endured through the first part of this season, injuries and otherwise, and come out of it 5-2 after the first 8 games, going into a 5-game road trip with some very winnable games on it. I think that's a very strong place for this Trailblazers team to be at this point in time in the season. And again, if they're able to go out and perform on this trip, then I think you also just maybe start to reassess a little bit where you think this team might be at in their growth and whether or not they might be able to do a little bit more than maybe some of us thought they would do this season. So a good opportunity to get out on the road and see what this team is made of. Well, as I mentioned, not only the Trailblazers playing well, but they're playing well despite the fact that they've had to endure a number of injuries, really at kind of at the same positions, guys who have been really important to the way they've been trying to play this season, particularly on the defensive end. And by losing those guys, I think that it has a bigger impact than you would necessarily assume losing a few guys off the bench would because of the way the Blazers are playing this year, playing faster, rotating a lot more players in and out in order to try to play that fast, kinetic style of basketball that the Thiago and the rest of the Trailblazer staff has installed. And so, for the Blazers to do as well as they've done thus far while having these injuries, I think again just goes to show that they're probably maybe a little bit further along in the process than a lot of people assumed, and maybe a little bit closer to really being a competitive team than at least nationally people thought they were going to be. I think a lot of us here in Portland knew that like this team was better and had designs on being a better team than I think, some people outside of Portland might have thought. But let's just go ahead and kind of recap where they're at right now in terms of those injuries and those rehabilitations. So Matisse Thybulle injured his thumb in the game versus the Jazz in Utah. Subsequent MRI on Thursday revealed a tear of the ulnar collateral ligament, UCL, of that left thumb. Matisse underwent successful surgery on Friday, which was performed by Stephen S. Shin, MD, at the Cedars-Sinai Jerlin-Kobe Surgery Center in Los Angeles. He will be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. So at this point in time, Matisse's return from that injury, that UCL tear in his left thumb, probably puts him maybe middle of December, probably more end of December, beginning of the new year. One of the good things about that injury, at least for Matisse, is that it is just a thumb injury. So you would imagine that he's able to still probably do a lot of stuff on the court. And so you would imagine whenever that tear is healed, I imagine he'll probably be able to return to the court pretty quickly because you don't assume that he's probably going to have a whole lot of lead up time in terms of getting back into shape before he gets out there to play a game. Granted, game shape is something different, but I mean, Matisse is in fantastic shape as it is. He's been so good to start the season, like just getting in spot minutes and just having an effect every single time he's out there. Still has a steal streak, even though he left that game versus Utah, I think after 4 minutes, managed to get 2 steals in 4 minutes in that game versus the Jazz in Utah. So a bummer about Matisse that he has had to have surgery. He's got a bunch of like electrodes and stuff that are going to it. I'm sure there's some kind of like electric therapy that he's getting in order to speed up that process. But the one good thing, as I mentioned, is that you assume that once that tear is healed in that thumb, that he'll be able to get back out on the court directly. A little bit of a different situation, unfortunately, for Blake Wesley. Blake underwent surgery on Wednesday to repair a fracture of the 5th metatarsal base in his right foot. That injury suffered during the game versus the Nuggets. Blake Wesley has been an absolute revelation for the Trailblazers. Defensively, just an pest so fast, really gets the team kind of going and delivers a dose of energy to the team, which I think, after the Laker game, I think you look at that game and you're like, hey, if they have Blake Wesley in that game to kind of come in those first, second rotations and kind of pick things up a little bit, get the team moving at a faster pace, which is something he's done a really good job of. Maybe that game goes another direction. Fortunately, Blake wasn't available for that game because he has a broken foot. Did get surgery to repair that foot on Wednesday. That procedure was performed in New York. Wesley's rehabilitation for that surgery expected to sideline him for 8 to 12 weeks. And unfortunately, unlike Matisse's injury, when you have a foot bone break, you basically have to stay off that foot for a while. So he'll be on crutches for a while. He'll then be in a boot, and then eventually he'll be able to return to play. But I don't know how much you can really do in terms of fitness and on court when you have a broken foot. So you would imagine that, bare minimum, that 8 to 12 week timeline, that puts him well into 2026 before his return. And even then, he's going to have to get back into shape. That return from injury from a broken foot, much more difficult and extended than a return from a thumb ligament tear like Matisse Thybulle. So that's just a supreme bummer for Blake Wesley, who, again, after, getting drafted by the Spurs, gets cut, comes to Portland, and, I think it's kind of an afterthought for a lot of people, but comes in and has an effect right away, really kind of draws attention of opposing coaches and just opposing teams because of the way he comes out and plays. I thought, JJ Redick saying that, the Blake Wesley that we've been seeing on tape with the Trailblazers is not the Blake Wesley that we saw with the Spurs. I think that for a player like Blake, who's kind of trying to establish himself in the league, I think that's really impressive. And so it's never good when guys have injuries. It's especially a bummer when a guy like Blake Wesley, who's been playing so well, playing so hard, and really, again, establishing himself in the league, has an injury that's going to keep him out now for at least 2 months, potentially as long as 3 months. So that stinks for Blake Wesley. And the other part of that too is that, you lose Matisse, who's kind of a 2-3 wing. You lose Blake Wesley, who's kind of your backup point guard at this point. And you still don't have Scoot Henderson, who is still out with the torn hamstring muscle. At this point in time, we're a little over 5 weeks into the 4 to 8 week estimation that the team gave in terms of Scoot Henderson's rehabilitation from that torn hamstring. No update on that yet. I'm guessing there's probably not going to be an update on that until he's actually back on the court practicing with the team. Not sure if he went on this road trip. I suspect he probably did, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know that there really be anything to take from that anyways, particularly with the way that trip spaces out. Even if you are injured, it's a good trip to go on. To one, it's just always good to be with the team. And two, since it's not a bunch of back-to-backs, you're still able to get in your rehabilitation, your workouts, whatever your return to play plan is. Those are things that can be done when you're on the road, when you have days off in between games. Maybe not so much when you have a few back-to-backs and so on and so forth. So I'm curious to see if Scoot did make that trip. But still, again, a little over 5 weeks into that 4 to 8 week estimation. And that, again, was just for return to play. And again, the thing like a hamstring, even worse than even a thing like a broken foot, in that a hamstring, like, until you can't feel it anymore, the injury, you basically your chance in coming back. It's just those soft tissue injuries, particularly when it comes to things like hamstrings, are just so fickle. And so a lot of times it's really tough to tell, like, how close to returning are you, because, if it feels a little something, if you have a sprained ankle, a rolled ankle, you tear a ligament in your thumb, you can tell where it's at, and you can have some issues with it while not exacerbating that issue. With hamstrings, it's like you could just pop it again on accident, and then you're set back another 4 to 8 weeks. So with that hamstring injury, I know that they're just going really slow with it and really trying to make sure that Scoot is completely healthy before he even starts his return to play on the court, because they can't chance losing him for any longer than they already have. Jrue has done a phenomenal job, but having a point guard like Scoot on your team really, again, I think that just elevates what this team can do. And when you're playing the way the Blazers are playing right now, to have a guy in Scoot Henderson, high energy, able to get into the paint, able to, again, get his own shot, a guy who's able to get to the rim as well as better at finishing at the rim. Those are the things that are really helpful when you're a team that just has some high variance in terms of your offensive production. So when you have another guy like Scoot, who's kind of like a guard version of Deni, in that he can just put his head down, get to the rim, get trips to the line, and that can sustain you when you're having difficulty scoring through the flow of your offense and through the field. So, that's obviously been a real bummer of an injury. Hopefully Scoot able to come back sooner rather than later, but we just don't really have an update on that. And I'm not sure that we're going to necessarily get one until he's closer to that return date, whenever that is going to be. But he's, by the end of this week, I believe that'll be 6 weeks. So another 2 weeks in that initial estimation about his return. And again, it's also like, you hope that estimation is correct. But I mean, Joe Cronin at media day, when he was talking about the injury, I think, again, put it best. He was just like, hey, like he's ready to come back when he's ready to come back. Like, and we hope that's going to be sooner rather than later. We hope it's not going to be any longer than 8 weeks, but it might be. It's just hard to tell. And so it's not like a broken bone where you can kind of, generalize about what the amount of time that's going to take to heal is going to be. With soft tissue stuff like hamstrings, it's just a lot more difficult. So fingers crossed, sooner rather than later for Scoot. But we have Matisse out now for an extended period of time, Blake Wesley out for at least 2 months, if not 3 months, and then Scoot out for at least another couple weeks, if not a little bit longer than that. But if you're able to get any of those guys back sooner rather than later, I think you feel really good about Portland's chances. And again, they're playing pretty good basketball as it is. If you're able to add any one of those guys who have been very effective for this team in the past, either in previous seasons with Scoot or this season with both Matisse and Blake Wesley, again, it's just one more thing to make you look at this team and say, like, hey, these guys are a bit further along than I think a lot of people think they might be. And again, allowing yourself to maybe think about what that might mean for this team going forward if they're able to continue to play good basketball particularly on this next road trip, as they have played through the first 8 games of the season, most of those at home. And finally, with the Rip City Remix beginning their season on Friday versus the Santa Cruz Warriors down in Santa Cruz, let's go ahead and hear from Jonah Hersku, the head coach of the Remix, first-year head coach for the Rip City Remix for Jonah. A few weeks ago, I talked to Jonah just about the season upcoming and his thoughts on being the Remix head coach, kind of his thoughts on the importance of the G League and the Remix in terms of improving the Portland Trailblazers, kind of some of his thoughts on the two-ways. And we recorded this podcast before Javonte Cook was given the third two-way spot. That's why we don't talk about him in it, but talk about Caleb Love, Sidi Sissoko, and just kind of the general thoughts about the Remix and going into the season, how they're going to play, and the purpose of having the Remix and why it's such a valuable relationship to have the Remix in terms of the way that they're able to use the Remix in order to make the Portland Trailblazers better. As I mentioned, their season starts on Friday versus Santa Cruz Warriors. They don't actually play a home game until December. They start out with the first, I think, 5 or 6 games on the road versus Santa Cruz, Valley Suns down in Tempe, South Bay Lakers, San Diego Clippers, Valley Suns again. They actually don't play a home game at Chiles Center until they host the San Diego Clippers, I should say, on December 2nd. But let's go ahead and hear from Jonah. And also, too, just should mention Hansen has been going back and forth practicing with the Remix, as did Rob Williams. So we're already kind of getting a sense of how the team is utilizing the Remix in terms of getting guys like Rob ready to return to play. So again, I'll be surprised at some point in time, maybe Scoot Henderson, has a few practices with the Remix in order to get back into his rhythm before he rejoins the team. And then in Hansen, you have a guy who is playing some time with the Remix, practicing with the Remix, because, now that Rob is back, that pushes Hansen further down the depth chart. Once the season starts, team not really able to practice as much as they do during training camp. Hansen's a guy who needs the reps and needs to be able to continue to play and to improve as a rookie. So sending him down to the G League to work out with the remix in order to just kind of keep his fitness up and just get his rhythm down, which again I think just goes to show the value of having the remix outside of just the games and it being an exciting environment and more basketball in the city, but just the way the team is able to use the remix in order to again put the Trailblazers on a better footing to have success going forward. So let's go ahead and hear from Jonah, his thoughts heading into his first season as the head coach of the Rip City Remix. All right, here with Jonah Hersku, the first-year head coach of the Rip City Remix. Jonah, thank you so much for taking some time with me. First off, I guess, what are you kind of looking forward to here in your first season with the Remix, and I think the third season of the Remix's existence?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Casey. Looking forward to talking to you today. Volume 3 for the Remix this year, our third season in existence. I'm looking forward to being a head coach, and I think a lot of people that do this have aspirations of being a head coach that work in basketball. I've gotten a chance 2 summers and 3 summers ago to be the summer league head coach, so really excited to get head coaching experience, but really carrying out the vision of Joe Cronin in this developmental program.
And I guess that kind of leads to my next question, which is how do you view the role of the Remix? Because I think obviously it's a team, and as a team, I think there's always we want to win, we want to be successful, which makes perfect sense. And also I know that maybe from a broader perspective, a lot of the Remix is we want to try some things. We want to use this team as a way to make the Trailblazers a better team. So how do you kind of view the role of the Remix and your place on it?
Yeah, I'd say all the above. Yeah. But no, seriously, it's obviously a very competitive league, and we're trying to win and have a good process in preparing to win. That being said, it used to be called the developmental league. When I worked in this league, 2012, 13, and 2015, 16, that's what it was called. So there's definitely a aspect of this that it's about development, and from assignment players from the Blazers to our two-way players to our roster players, a lot of what we do will be focused on development. It's kind of like that JV mentality if we want to be aligned with the NBA team. So if players are fluctuating between the two teams, they know what's going on. And then, like you said, there will definitely be some things that we'll try. That might come from Coach Billups. At times, it'll come from us. But there's definitely some research and development that can take place in this league. But by and large, I think it's more being, competing. And I think part of developing is learning how to win and playing the right way. And I think those things aren't completely separate.
Yeah,
there's definitely some overlap
really good point.
Between those two things.
Absolutely. You've got experience in the NBA, WNBA, G League, college. Can you talk a little bit about just your basketball journey and how you feel like those experiences are going to help you stepping into this role with the Remix?
For sure. The Spark Notes version, I was a bad Division III player, Carleton College in Minnesota. I was out of school for a year, and I got an internship with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. That was kind of like a video coordinator internship, but at the time, video wasn't what it is now, and minor league staffs were smaller then. So the coach I worked for, Dwayne Tickner, he actually lives in Vancouver, Washington now, so he'll come around this year. But he was a longtime minor league head coach and had a lot of success. He ended up working for Jaeger in Memphis and Sacramento after that. But he pretty much told me, if you deal with your stuff off the court and responsibilities off the court, I'll give you on-court responsibilities. So I made sure the laundry was clean, the opposing teams I had to pick up in the van. But with that, I got great opportunity on the court as a 20-year-old, which was really, really cool. From there, got connected with someone that worked for the Chicago Sky. So I was a video coordinator for the Chicago Sky. And the head video coordinator at the time, Paul Miller, had worked for the Chicago Bulls. So I ended up going back to school in Minnesota. He calls me a month later. He's like, hey, you can come be the video intern for the Bulls, but you pretty much got to come right now. So I had a pretty big decision. I was 21 at the time, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. So I transferred schools, finished school at Lake Forest College, and I was a video intern for the Bulls. I went back to the Chicago Sky that summer, back to the Bulls, back to the Sky. Ended up going back to Fort Wayne as an assistant coach, back to the Chicago Sky as an assistant coach, and then came to the LA Lakers. 2016-17 as assistant video coordinator, but it was really good those first 4 years. I had 8 seasons because the NBA and the D League are the winter, WNBA is the summer. So, I was 25 maybe, but I had like 8 seasons of professional basketball experience. So I was with the Lakers for 3 years, started as a assistant video coordinator, then I was player development and an advanced scout. Went up to Sacramento, worked for Luke Walton those 6 years, 3 more years in Sacramento, advanced scout, player development, and then promoted to an assistant coach. And then I've been here the last 3 years as an assistant coach. So doing a northern tour of the West Coast. But really through all those experiences, it's pretty cool. Like now sitting in, that head coach's chair, like I have a lot of different experiences. And I think I've done a lot of the roles within a staff from, if you include the summer leagues that I've been involved with, I've been on the offensive side, I've been on the defensive side, I've worked with special teams, I've done player development, I've done video, I've done advanced scouting. So I think what I'm looking forward to is kind of putting all of those aspects together and knowing what I want and what to expect in each of the roles that work with me and for me and from each of them.
Absolutely. How far into the process of building out your staff are you at this point? Because I know obviously the G League runs on a little bit of a different schedule than the NBA does.
Yeah, we finalized it, I think, a week ago. So really excited about the staff. Charles Klask will be top assistant. He was in Denver, won a championship with them a couple years ago. Has worked in the minor leagues before, but has been in a lot of different places in the NBA within some different roles. So I'm learning a lot from him. He's helping me a ton. Nishan could join. He was in Memphis last year as a video coordinator, a lot of player development experience. And then Lex Edwards will be another assistant. He was in Phoenix and Milwaukee last couple of years, video room and player development roles. And then Tyler Roberson will be the video coordinator. He played at Syracuse, for you Syracuse fans out there. And actually our GM, Deni Connors, went to Syracuse, so they got a nice little connection. And Tyler recently stopped playing professionally, so nice development role for him, but also like he played in the G League, so it's pretty cool to have that perspective as well.
Kind of, I guess, how would you describe kind of just your thoughts on the G League? Because I mean, we talked a little about it before about it being kind of a feeder, but it also seems like, there's guys that play in the G League that like kind of make a career out of that, and just the opportunity to kind of keep those that ability to play basketball and be in a system. I think, obviously it's great to help the team, but I'm guessing in some respects too, it's like, well, I play in the G League and I'm happy that I'm in the G League.
Yeah, I'd say in about 10 years since I was in it last, it's changed a lot. Yeah. My first year in 2012-13, there were 3 types of contracts. You could have an A contract, B contract, C contract. I believe the A contract at that time was $21,000. B was like maybe 18, and C was like 14,000. And now, that number is close to 50,000 for a standard G League contract. So I think like just financially speaking, it's a lot easier. And the team, every team's giving the players, insurance and place to live and basic human needs, things like that. But I just think making a living is a lot easier now. And then there's other leagues. There's the Puerto Rican League. There's the Canadian League. There's other leagues that in the off season you can supplement a standard G League contract with that, and you can make a pretty good living. So I think from that perspective, it's definitely developed. I know the NBA really cares about it, and it's poured a lot of resources into it. I think from the just basketball purist point of view, the league's really good. And, every year you see the number of coaches and players in the playoffs that had G League experience and overall that had G League experience. So I think it's been less like of a stigma, if you will. And it's almost like a badge of honor now. And I think from staff to coaches to players, it's just a really good route. And I think game reps are so important. Like I love running a player development drill, but there's no substitution for game minutes. And I think even if the role maybe is a little different than what you'd play in the G League to the NBA, getting those game minutes is like the most valuable thing.
Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of NBA guys going and playing in the G League? Because I think, people have seen obviously the two-way guys, but then they see guys like Reath, you see a guy like Duop who, we thought was going to play in the G League, and it's like, no, maybe not. So how do you kind of view that relationship with like NBA players and going to the remix and getting in reps and having that ability to, as you mentioned, kind of compete, which is something that you can't really replicate in a practice. You can try, right, but there's the actual reps and knowing what to do in a game situation. There's really no substitute for that other than actually playing a game, which you can do in the G League.
Yeah, I think from players' perspective, just starting, like I remember WAP last year asked to go play, and sometimes just staying in rhythm. It's your job as a professional to always stay ready. And like you said, we do things during practice. We'll have stay ready games, and they'll play 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5 situations, but it's not a game, right? And keeping your conditioning up is really, really important. So I think sometimes players want to keep that rhythm or try to find it or find their confidence. And then, one of the reasons we'll be very aligned with Blazers this year is for that reason. Like, if someone like a Rupert were to fluctuate between the two teams, he's not really missing a beat. And then I think just across the league, like how skilled the players are in the G League really helps. Like, you're not coming down just scoring 40. I guess WAP had 39 2 years ago, or three seasons ago in LA on opening night. But like for the most part, that league is so good, and every team has, generally speaking, a couple two-ways, maybe a couple assignments. So just the overall talent level has gotten so much better across the league.
Could you talk a little about the two-way guys? I'm not sure exactly how much of the roster has been built out yet, but obviously I know the two-way guys, particularly guys like Caleb Love. Like, can you talk a little bit all about kind of how you maybe plan on not utilizing them, but just kind of that relationship as being a two-way guy and understanding that you're going to be with the Blazers sometimes and you're going to be with the Remix sometimes, and how you feel like that kind of works out practically?
Yeah, I think practically just overall it's a really good like in-between. And I think now that two-way contract has gotten a little more, financially speaking also, so it makes it a little more, maybe worth it. But like everything, like my advice is always put your head down and work. Yeah. That stuff's going to figure itself out. And then you're also, when you're on a two-way, everyone, you're pretty much a free agent for the NBA across the whole NBA. So you're showcasing your talent every night, and it's not like the NBA team has your rights. So obviously for our guys, but even our scouts, like we're looking at other two-ways across the league and seeing what they're doing. I think specifically when you think about C Love and City, that our two-ways we have under contract right now, both really good with the ball in their hands. C Love, I think of him as a three-level scorer, from outside, from mid-range, again to the paint. I've been really impressed with his defense, starting in summer league and through our workouts in August and September, like getting in a stance, putting his chest on the ball, using some physicality, but he loves to compete. So I'm really excited to see, in both leagues when he does get his opportunity, how he plays. And I think our fans remember City, he gets in the paint with his size, and almost similar to like how Deni does it. Like he gets that shoulder into you, and then he's such a willing passer that he can get to the rim, he can finish, but then when he draws two, he's kicking out and making the right play. I've been really impressed with him the last couple of weeks. He's been defending at a high level. He's been shooting it well. So I'm excited for both those guys just coming into this season.
Absolutely. Well, just to wrap up here, I guess, what are you kind of looking forward to the most? Obviously, you're very excited about the opportunity, and which I think is awesome. And I know that our fans love the remix, and it's I know that people really love going to games there as well. So as someone who's kind of, I know you've had experience in it, but as someone who's going to be taking that mantle, kind of what are you most enthusiastic about?
Yeah, seeing the fans out at Child Center is going to be awesome, and just building our unity as a team, as a group, really important to me. Just having a lot of really good synergy and, good juju across the team. For me personally, executing things I've thought about executing, I'm excited about. I'm also excited about making mistakes, learning from them. I think that's where growth happens. So being honest with myself, listening to my coaches, seeing what I could do better. But it's a really good growth opportunity for myself that I'm looking forward to.
Jonah, thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it. Go Blazers. Go Rip City.
And there you go, Jonah Hersku, head coach of the Rip City Remix. Always enjoyed talking to Jonah. Great basketball guy. Loves the game. As you know, he's been working his way through all the different kinds of league, and is really excited about his opportunity to be the head coach of the Remix. I'm really looking forward to Jonah and his staff having some success there, and looking forward to get out some games at the Remix this year. I live in North Portland, so Chiles Center, University of Portland, just right down the street. So it should be a fun season for the Remix. I definitely recommend heading out to a game if you get the opportunity. As I mentioned, they don't play in Portland until December. So at that point in time, go ahead and check them out in person. But all those games available on YouTube TV and a couple different places as well. They stream for free. So if you want to check out some Rip City Remix games, I would definitely suggest you do so. Also signing Dylan Jones from Weber State was the first pick of the G League draft after he got cut by the Wizards. The Remix didn't have the first pick, but they ended up trading future picks for Dylan Jones. I think that's a really exciting pickup for the Remix. I think it's really smart. I really like that brand of player, kind of that bigger, 2-3 ball handling guy who can defend multiple positions, play some four for you, maybe even some five, and at least in defense sometimes too. So I really like that pickup for the Remix. I'm curious to see if maybe Hansen gets some run with the Remix this season as well. Obviously, as I just mentioned, he's been practicing with the Remix. He's been sent down twice now. He was sent down last weekend to participate in practices with the Remix, and then I think also on Tuesday he joined the Remix after the Laker game, so he'd get into practice then. And that's a lot of that too. I think it's kind of like an insurance thing. The Remix practice at the Trailblazers practice facility, so it's not like he's like got to go somewhere, do anything to get assigned. I just think it's more you have to assign a player in order for them to practice with the Remix, because then if something happens, God forbid, I think it means he was under contract with them. So I think there's some liability issues there probably. I think that's really kind of the reason why they do that. Otherwise, he's down in Tualatin anyways. He could be practicing with the Remix anyways. But I think it's one of those logistical things I think they have to do in order to stay compliant in terms of kind of some of the legalities in terms of contracts in the NBA versus the Remix, so on and so forth. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase. Thank you so much for joining me as always. As you can probably tell, I am not on the road with the team for this 5-game road trip, so some opportunities to record some post-game episodes of The Briefcase, which I will do while the team is out on the road, so be on the lookout for that. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I am Casey Holdahl. You have been watching The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Go Blazers.